Resident Evil 2 is like no other game I have played. Born from the remnants of old games past, there hasn't been something like this in 8 years. If you want to be series specific, it might be 14. It's a genre that old gamers will tell you was once the bee's knees and have tons of nostalgia for. As someone who has had virtually no contact with the Resident Evil brand until now, I haven't even seen one of those dumb movies, I was excited by this game. And the weird thing is, my excitement wasn't from any of the old people's fanboying. I randomly saw 10 seconds of some gameplay and thought, wow, that looks pretty cool. That alone got me interested in the game and worked in my favor. Because other than some gaming publications not being able to hold in spoilers for less than a week, I was able to go into the game as clean as possible. So Resident Evil 2 Remake is a really good game. It honestly took me by surprise how quickly it thrusts you into playing. It's a game that doesn't really hold your hand and expects you to figure stuff out. People continually say that it's a slow game and that it's purposeful. There is some slight truth to that statement, but it doesn't capture the whole situation. So let me paint a picture. When you are stealthing in a video game, are you trying to make noise and get caught? No, this is the kind of pace that Resident Evil 2 has. It's not slow because it's a slow game, it's slow because you decided to be. As someone who likes immediate feedback, I'm an impatient gamer, this was really fun. Going around being careful but not defenseless. You have weapons, you should use them. Some reviewers will tell you that it might be better to run past an enemy rather than shoot them. Lies! Okay, not entirely lies, but the point is your weapons aren't useless. Why would they give you so many if they didn't do anything? That's kind of like my intro for this review. It's a fun game. I don't know if it's a 9 out of 10, but my guess is people are looking at the game with nostalgia goggles on, but that doesn't mean it isn't dope as fuck. I think tone is a really important thing to ease players into games.
No way. This can't be.
Resident Evil 2 does this perfectly through its gameplay. It doesn't matter you shot that zombie in the head a couple of times, if you don't move, it will bite you. There is an ever-looming sense of urgency in the moment-to-moment gameplay. This is balanced out by the fun exploration vibe that you get from actually playing the game. The first and most memorable location is the police station. You end up spending so much time here, making the space so familiar that you get really comfortable in it.
Hello? Is anybody here?
That exploration vibe really works here, and making your way through zombies creates the tension while having fun. The place is jam-packed with detail and is basically the antithesis of empty open-world games. My favorite part is that there is so much to do in such a small space, and it's not even that small. The more you explore, the more you are rewarded. I love the fact that if you don't do certain things, you aren't forced to do them. You aren't given the reward for completing things you skipped, but the game doesn't force you to make life easier for yourself. Resident Evil 2 is very refreshing in this respect. It lets you take everything in and appreciate a lot of the little things. This is where I have to bring up something that gamers are split on. In 2D platformers, or platformers in general, there are timed levels. This idea transcends platformers, but it's easier for me to talk about it in this context. In platforming games, there might be some levels where water, or sometimes it's lava, is rising from the bottom of the screen. It basically acts as a timer for the player, making the need for them to go faster. This idea of a timer is in Resident Evil 2. It happens, and when it's in effect, it completely changes the feel of the game. Some people hate timers in general, some hate the way it was done in Resident Evil 2. I liked the added sense of tension. Was it a bit bullshit sometimes? Sure, but I think it netted out as a positive for me. It's also really fun how the context of the timer changes on the second playthrough of the game. So the timer works, but I did need to say there was one. Back to my second playthrough comment, if you do play this game, you need to play the main campaign and the second main campaign. Instead of a new game plus mode or extra endings, Resident Evil 2 has you play as a completely different character. My understanding of the second main campaign was that the experience was going to be completely different and that there was going to be only slight similarities. Nope. The reason I say this is that when people talk about the second playthrough, they say what the game tells you. That it's different. That there's more to it. In reality, you end up going to the same locations and doing very similar things. But that isn't bad. Since locations can be fairly large, you end up in a completely different part of the area, recontextualizing how you interact with the space. Adding to this difference is you. You are a different player. Since you spend like 7 hours on your first playthrough, everything in the game is pretty familiar to you. You still don't want to be bitten by zombies, but you can take care of yourself. Your second playthrough is almost like an action game at points. You know how to kill things, and might be pretty good at doing it too. There is only one major area where the game isn't as good as it could be, and that is what could be considered boss encounters. These situations are weird because they play completely differently than the rest of the game. It's not always intuitive how to get past these sections, and the controls are just cumbersome enough to make some of these moments frustrating. As my last bullet point, I want to vaguely talk about the story. You might hear people describe it as a B-movie story. Some people might even say that it's improved over the original. For that second statement, I totally agree, but saying that it's a B-movie story is misleading. You don't play Resident Evil 2 Remake for the story. You play it for the gameplay. The story is nice and easy to follow, but it's nothing to rave about. I mean, there are tons of things that took me out of the experience. A bunch of mediocre voice acting, weird character relationships and such, but I want to make it clear that this game overcomes all of that. This is definitely a really good game. I want to go back and play through the game in reverse order. I want to go play the survival mode, and I want to see how far I can get, and most importantly, I want to play as a giant piece of tofu.